Alright, so our next transformation that we're going to be talking about are reflections, and this is on page 6 of your packet. A reflection is the movement of a figure that is flipped over a line of symmetry. And remember on that first page of our packet we talked about that FL, even though it's kind of a little bit of a stretch, FL, flip, we're just flipping a shape over a certain line. So we have a rule when we're going to be determining a shape that's been reflected over the x-axis. Remember we have our x and our y-axis. X is horizontal and y is vertical. If you have a shape right here and you're going to flip it over the x-axis, it's just going to come right down here. It's just going to look like it was mirrored over that x-axis line. And that's going to keep the same x value, but we're going to change our y. We're just going to take it, if it was positive, we're going to make it negative, and if it was negative, we're going to make it positive. So you keep your x and you change your y. So I want you to write that down. We're going to keep x and change y. And that makes sense, because if we had this point right here, and we were going to flip it over the x-axis, they line up. They're going to be at that same point right there on the x. But their y values, where they are vertically, are different. They're just going to be opposite of one another. Now when you're going to reflect a shape over the y-axis, this is going to be a little bit different, but a similar kind of idea. So if you have your coordinate grid again, and you're flipping something over the y-axis this time, say we start with that same triangle. Now we're going to flip it over this line, and it's going to end up over here. So that means that we're going to reflect the shape over the y-axis. The x-coordinate is going to change this time. So whatever the x-coordinate was, if it was positive, make it negative. If it was negative, make it positive. Your y value, though, is going to stay the same. So again, if you had this point and you were taking it over here, notice they're not in the same x spot. They're going to have different x points, but vertically they're at the same spot, so their y stays the same. So in this case, we keep y and change x. So go ahead and write those two little tricks down in your notes so you have them. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and look at this example. It says triangle DEF has vertices D at 2, 2, E at 5, 4, and F at 1, 5. Find the reflected vertices of D prime, E prime, F prime over both the x-axis and y-axis. So we're going to take our points and we're first going to reflect them about the x-axis. Remember, for x-axis reflections, we are keeping our x, so keep your x, but change y. So that means in point D, for D prime, we're going to keep the x, so 2 stays the same. But our y, we're just going to change. It was positive 2, so now it's just going to be negative 2. In point E prime, we keep our x, so it's 5. And then our y was 4, we're going to change it to negative 4. And in F prime, we keep our x, it's 1, and our 5 was positive, so now it's negative. So that's what we get for when we're going to flip it over the x-axis. And then, once we want to do flipping over the y-axis, we're going to start, again, we're going to start with these points here, these D, E, F, where we started. So point D was at 2, 2, so now we're just going to, for our y-axis, we're going to keep y the same, but change x. So our x value was 2, so we're going to change it. It's going to be negative 2, and our y stays the same. We keep it, so it's negative 2, 2. Our original point E was at 5, 4. We're going to change our x and keep our y. And then here we're going to say for point F, we were at 1, 5. We're going to change our x and keep our y. So there's all of our new points there. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to graph each of these. So our original shape was at 2, 2, 5, 4, and we had 1, 5. So those were our original points here. And then we went and we reflected it over the x-axis first. Our line of symmetry becomes this x-axis right here. So it's just going to look like it got mirrored over there. So we have point 2, negative 2. That's going to be D prime. Then we had 5, negative 4. That's going to be E prime. And then point F prime is at 1, negative 5. That's right down here. So once you make that shape, it should look like you kind of took that graph and folded it in half and made that shape down below. And it looks like it has that same amount of distance between these points. So if you counted from E to E prime, to get down to the x-axis, we're going 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces down, and to get to the x-axis from this point, we go 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces up. So they're the same distance from that x-axis. That means that they were reflected perfectly over that line. So if you took that paper and you folded it, then they would line up there. Now when we did our reflection over our y-axis, we started with this original shape and we reflected each of those points. Our new points were at -2, 2. We had -5, 4. And our last point was -1, 5. That was right up here. So then our new shape, you can tell at this point, all we did is we took that shape and we flipped it over the y-axis this time. So it got reflected across the other way. So in this case, we'd be folding our paper in half the other way, and they would line up. They are like a mirror image of one another. And again, to just test a point of how far it is, this point F, it's just 1 away from the x-axis. But the point F double prime is also 1 away from that y-axis. So they're equal distance apart, and it's that perfect mirror image. Okay, so go ahead and try this example on page 7 on your own. I want you to graph each of the images, and then you're going to reflect it over the x-axis, and then reflect the original image over the y-axis. Make sure you're drawing all 3 of those triangles, and either label your vertices or draw them in different colors so you can keep track of which one is which. Go ahead and pause the video, then unpause when you're ready to check your work. Okay, so in the first part, we have a reflection over the x-axis, so keep your x, but change your y. And all of our points be these points right here. And then remember, for your reflection about the y-axis this time, we're going to change x and keep y. So go ahead and your points become this. And once you have all your points done, you can go ahead and graph each of those on your coordinate grid. So here's the shape for our original points M, N, P. Here's our drawing for M prime, N prime, P prime. And that was when we reflected across the x-axis. So remember, if you were going to fold your paper over that x line, then you would see that they would line up. They're that perfect mirror image. And then here's our last image. We have M double prime, N double prime, P double prime. And that was the one that was reflected across the y-axis. So if we took your paper and folded it on that y-axis, you would see that those 2 shapes do line up, so that was a reflection across the y-axis. Okay, now that you've learned reflections, go ahead and stop this video. You're going to take the reflections formative before moving on in your notes.